Welcome everybody. This is Straight Up Craft Dev Day on Matrix, Entry Types, and Advanced Content Layouts. I'm Ben Parizek, and we're joined by several members of the community. We're going to be diving into some, what, what is one of the coolest features in Craft, that can be said about a lot of its features, and that is the updated Matrix field type in Craft, which gives us a lot of new possibilities in our designs and layouts, and a lot of more control we can give the clients in building more advanced layouts on their own. Along with Matrix, Craft also comes with another feature called entry types, which allows us to kind of have multiple instances of the same entry, and we'll give better examples of this shortly, but the combination of the two leads us to have a lot of control over different the content on our site and the control we give our clients. So, all right, I'm going to get started with a few examples, and then feel free to jump in as you wish with your own thoughts, examples, or questions. So I was going to start by kind of giving you a tour of what we're doing on Straight Up Craft and talking about it a little bit behind the scenes. We redesigned recently, and we're heavily using entry types and and matrix layout. And you'll notice in our main feed of content on Straight Up Craft, we have a lot of different things happening. We've got short kind of link posts. We've got longer form article posts, and we've got a handful of different style. Here's an image-based post. Here's a tweet, and here's another article, or another link to an article, and then another on-site article. We've got a lot of things going on, and they're all being controlled by entry types and the matrix field. So the, uh, we're doing a couple different things here. So at, at the top level, we're really just controlling things by entry type. So if we have just a link on the site, it's an entry type. But and if we have an article, it's an entry type called article. However, within an entry, we might have several different types of layouts that we might want to happen. And in that case, we can start using the matrix field to control the different types of layouts. So within those entries, we have the chance to do combine different types of layouts even within those entries. So here we have an article which is a video of a previous dev day. We have a video which is actually a matrix block, and then we have a short description of the video, which is actually a text block in our matrix field. And here's another article where we have the top part of an article is a markdown field where we can display code and do our general discussion. And then I have a block called, I call it a regular expression block, where the goal was to identify the different parts of the irregular expression and break them out. And this is really just a table field that has two columns that allows me to kind of break it out and display it in the way that I want to. So entry types and matrix give us the power to kind of really combine a lot of different things here. So let's dig in and start taking a look at how we're doing that. All right, so here's another site we're going to use for example today. It's the Happy Logger website. This is a site that Brandon developed along with me with the first online virtual training for craft. And so there's several things going on in the site. We're just going to focus on the blog right now. And you'll see on the blog we're doing similar stuff. We've got on our blog a case study, a link, a blog post. We've got different types of content. And then some of those types of content, like the case study, we're going to have some more advanced layouts of what's happening there. So we've got an image floated to the right here. We've got a full quote floated to the left, and so on. So let's start taking a look at what are we doing in Craft to create this. We're going to start off by creating uh, our blog field type, I guess, or I guess we'll start out by, I'm not going to go into detail of creating all the fields. I'm just going to show you what's here really, but we'll discuss the steps involved here. So first we need the right section. So on our site, we've created a blog section. We can decide the different types of content we want to display in that section. And in our case, we've decided that we want a blog post. If we look at the blog post, we have a summary and body field associated with it. We created a new entry type called a link. And our link entry type just has a URL and a summary. And finally, we got our case study entry type. We've got a related project and our case study, which is our matrix field. So let's take a look at our matrix field and what we're doing here. We've got our 3 different types of content. And now we're going to create a more advanced content type within one of those types of content. So in our fields area here, we've created our case study field. And it's a matrix field. If you haven't worked with matrix fields, they're just like creating normal fields, except you can create lots of normal fields within them. And you can create groups of normal fields within them. So in the most simple form, we've created a new block type, and we're adding a single field to that block type, which we're calling text. And that text field is a rich text area. It's for our standard blog post if we just want to write a long form article. Now we can start getting a little more creative with what we're doing with matrix, and this is where the power starts to really kick in, because this is where, as designers, we get lots of control over the design, and as agencies or freelancers or whoever, as the people helping our clients, we can give them lots of control over their content and more advanced layouts, but keep their control very specifically. There's no more need to give them access to a WYSIWYG field and a crazy set of instructions about how to look at the HTML source code and add a class to what you need and do what you need there. So here we've created our image block, and within our image block we have an assets field, which allows them to upload an image. We have a caption, which is their ability to label that image how they want. And then we have an align field, which we're creating as a drop-down, and we're giving them specific control over the different ways that we're going to plan for them to output that content in their layout. So we only need to add to this drop-down what we want to give them control over and what we plan for control over in our CSS. Finally, we've got a quote field. We've got a plain text field for the quote. We've got a shorter plain text field here for who said the quote, and then we've got another align field. We allow them to align things right or left here. Are we good on what we've created in the back end here?
Yeah, I think that's all clear.
Okay,
Yep.
Cool. Now, a lot of this is just giving a little bit of context for us to make sure we're diving into the code examples on the same page here. So, all right, let's go to the front end of our website now, and we're going to focus on our index page of the blog, and we're going to focus on building out the code for this page and how we would go about doing that. So, so here's our. All right, so here's what we're trying to build out, and here's our code. I'm gonna really just focus as on the code we need to here, and we're just gonna ignore everything else. So let's focus on the center of the page here. We're looping through. We're looping through our blog section, and we're outputting for every entry in that blog. We're outputting. Right now, we're just outputting the type of entry that it is. So we see that our first entry is a case study entry type. our second is a link type, our fourth is a blog post, and we can start now controlling the page, and we can now start adding the code to deal with the rest of the stuff on the page. So the way I like to approach this is, let's create the structure of what we're going to be doing on the page first, and then get more specific. So I'm going to start by pasting in kind of some logic to deal with our entry type. So at the top level, we're looping through this, and before we know what we need to output, we need to decide what are we trying to output. And so we need to know if we're trying to output a link, a blog post, or a case study. I'm doing this in successive if statements. We could also do this with an else if statement or a switch statement. I just felt this is the simplest for the preliminary example here. It's really your preference, what makes the most sense to you. So we've given ourselves structure here. Now we're not going to get any errors if we're trying to put out the wrong field, and that field doesn't exist in the type of entry that's trying to be output. So if we were trying to put out one of the link fields in the blog post, Craft's going to throw an error or not display things properly because that field doesn't exist in the entry for the blog post. So now we know that every time we're trying to display a blog post, we're only going to be trying to display it with the code within our if statement here. So I'm going to just quickly address these simpler content types, and then we're going to focus a little more on the matrix. So for our link content type, we're just going to output a link to the URL. We're going to put our HTML that outputs the information about that entry type. For our blog post, we're going to do the same. This is probably pretty standard if you've worked with EE or Press or other systems before. Here, we're really just looping through, and now we're outputting our blog title and body and whatnot. And if I save that and refresh, we'll see that the page displays as we want it to, with our headers and descriptions for our links, and with our headers and bodies for our blog posts. Now, the one thing we're not outputting yet is our case study. And the case study kind of presents as a little more, a bit more of a challenge. The field type is a matrix field type. Our primary field type within it is a matrix field type, and that's the only field I'm going to worry about outputting right now. But let's start looking at what we need to do here. So within our case study, we need to loop through. Our matrix field is an array or an object in Craft. And in our templates, we really only have, it is a simplification, but I think a good one to run with. In our templates, we generally have two types of content that we're interacting with most frequently. We're interacting with strings, just simple content that when we output it, like our entry title, it outputs onto the page. And then we're dealing with arrays, which are things like our matrix field, or like our blog entries in general. There are multiple types of content that we need to loop through in order to output properly. And within the loop, we can then access the individual items within that object. So for our matrix field, we need to loop through it, and we're going to run into a similar problem like we had with the entry types. Is each block of our matrix field might not have the same fields associated with it. So we can't just put all of our fields in this part of the page. Otherwise, sometimes Craft might be trying to output one matrix block and failing because it's not part of, that field is not part of that block. So we need to make sure we're checking for all of our different types of blocks. And so in this case, I'm going to use a switch statement. We could do just like we did with the entry types here and just use simple if statements if we wanted to, but Craft has added a switch statement to Twig, and here I've placed it here. And so our switch statement, we're going to, as we're looping through our matrix field, we've identified each block that we're looping through as a block. And so our switch statement is going to check for our block type, and it's going to compare that block type to each one of our case types here. And these are going to match up in with the block types that we've created in our control panel here. So over here, you'll see your block types are text, image, and quote. And you'll see that here we're looping through our matrix field and we're testing for text, image, and quote by the handles that we've created in the system. We can be a little more specific if we wanted to. Sometimes I'll add like block to the end of my handles here just to make it a little bit more clear that I'm working with a block myself in the code. But right now we'll just leave that off. Because these are our handles. Okay, so within each block now, we can start outputting the fields associated with that block. So in the case of our text block, we have a text field named text, and we can output our text field just like we would any other field. For our image block, we have a few more fields to deal with, and a couple more things to deal with, like an image is also an object that we have to loop through in order to output it. And our align field is more about display than just outputting it, so we need to make sure we're putting it in the right place. So I'm not going to go over this code as much because we're focusing on layouts right now, but this is what we're going to output our image with. All right, and finally, we have our quote, and again, we have a couple more fields that we need to address with our quote. A couple of them are display, or one of them is display related, and we've got our quote. So now we can output this, and I guess the one thing I forgot here is just the title. Oops. Oops. Live coding, that's why I'm copying and pasting from the other screen. So. All right, we've got our title. All right, so here now we can start seeing our post come together on the front end, and it's outputting the content we've added, and that content is various blocks of content. So let's compare now what we're doing, what we've actually added here in the control panel. Or maybe I should have looked at the content we were entering earlier, but let's take a look now. So here's our matrix field. And you'll see we have our title, then we have our case study field, which is our matrix field. And we'll see we have a text block, and then we have an image block, and then we have another text block, and then we have a quote block. And Craft's looping through each of those, and first it outputs our text block, and then it outputs our image block, and then it outputs the next text block, and so on. We can update these. We can move them around if we decided we wanted our image lower on the page. We can now slide those around and refresh. I guess I got to save. Refresh, and we'll see that our matrix blocks allow us to refresh and such. We can also let a client do this using live preview. So that might be a little more helpful for somebody trying to get the placement of the images and quotes they want on the page if they wanted to move things around here. You'll see sometimes this is a little challenging because of the height of things. In the case that we run into there, you can collapse some of your blocks, so it's easier to move one of them above the other. And you'll see too, it's just really clean what we're doing here. Like, there's no weird pop-up window with 1,000 settings on what to do with your image. There's no weird instructions that come along with your new quote field and what you need to do. You really get to control exactly what you need over each of these settings of the interface. Questions?
Not a question, Ben, but it might be worth mentioning or just giving your opinion on the advantages of having an image matrix block and possibly disabling the image option in the WYSIWYG editor.
Yeah, I think, it's personal preference at the end of the day. If somebody really, so I think the benefit of the WYSIWYG is you get a little more flexibility if you know what you're doing, but I guess the trade-off is if you're handing this off to somebody with less technical skills, you kind of are presenting them a lot more options. Let me see if I actually have the image enabled here. So let's click on the image here in the WYSIWYG, and Craft actually makes this pretty clean compared to other systems as well. We do get a pretty clean interface here. If you use WordPress or a lot of the WYSIWYG field types in EE, there's just a lot of extra settings that are more friendly to people who understand CSS terms and such. So here we can add our image right in the WYSIWYG, but now we're presented with a problem if we're a non-technical user and that we don't know what to do next. We can position it. We can add a link to it. We can add a title to it. This is actually a pretty nice interface for what we want to do here, and it makes it simple. So if you're comfortable giving your client that, and your client would be comfortable with that, I think Craft's interface around it is pretty nice. It doesn't make it too complicated. Compared to other systems, it's wonderful. However, if you wanted to do more advanced things, maybe you needed to apply more than one CSS class, or you had 5 or 6 different options about how you're displaying your image. I'm going on a limb here, but if you needed more advanced things, Matrix gives you kind of the ability to customize the exact field types you need, and whatnot. If you wanted to only allow left and right, or only have one of these options for the images, I don't know a way to customize the default with this without maybe writing your own extension to Redactor or something. So if you need more customization than what this offers, then Matrix is a good option. Matrix blocks are a good option to start doing that.
Yeah, I personally find that I tried to make the WYSIWYG editor as lean as possible and remove anything that I can do with the matrix block, and the nice thing as well is, as you have there, you can have a caption. So you could have a caption that is styled underneath your image, which without matrix, if you were to do that with the WYSIWYG, you probably need some JavaScript code to make that happen.
Yeah, doing something like this is not possible with the WYSIWYG.
Exactly. So I think there's many advantages. And just the biggest one probably being just there's less chance of your client, breaking your design or doing something that you hadn't prepared for in terms of the design.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I've also run into is the image transform. Unless you pick that, and this may be updated down the track, but unless you pick the image transform up front, it's sort of hard to edit it afterwards, and often the client won't pick that transform. So
yeah,
again, I think that's another reason why, if you can keep it in the matrix field, it's going to give you much more functionality, flexibility.
So what Dane's referring to here is when you're inserting a image into the WYSIWYG here, down at the bottom you can actually select to insert a specific transform of that image. So if your client's uploading super large images and you want to optimize those images, in the case of the WYSIWYG, you'd need to give them directions on which transform to insert. Whereas if you're just controlling it with a matrix field, you can determine in your code what transform you want to be using and what context you're in. So.
Yeah.
And one more thing, Ben, can you just view the source code of your WYSIWYG editor? I think Redactor is pretty good. It outputs pretty clean code. So there's no width, right, on that image.
I don't see one, no.
No. But there are other, obviously not in Craft, but in other CMSs and other WYSIWYG editors, they'll actually put they'll put a fixed width on that. And then that causes issues when you're creating a responsive design. So you want that width of the image to respond to the size. So you'll generally put it at a percentage, and if you have a fixed pixel width, it doesn't work well responsively. But it seems, Redactor doesn't have that issue. I also see Redactor puts its own margin on images, though, which is interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm not too familiar with all of the decisions it makes. So one thing that's happening here that you're going to see in the code of Redactor is this hashtag asset:18. And this is actually Craft being smart for you and giving a reference to itself to know which asset in the system you've linked to here, so that if I guess I don't know. Does anybody know exactly? I think that helps you change between environments and keep the URL straight. I don't know how persistent it would be if you moved assets around. Maybe Brad can jump in if you're there, Brad. But if you changed an asset in a separate part of the system, I don't know if your WYSIWYG would. I guess if the ID is the same, it should update appropriately.
Yeah, that's the idea behind it.
Okay. So if you're like over in your assets tab, moving assets around and they're attached to your WYSIWYG fields, Craft's smart enough to have a clue that you're doing that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's supposed to work between local and cloud sources too. So if you're dragging files locally to say S3 or something like that, all of the links should still work.
Nice.
Ben, just a quick question around images, and I suppose it is relevant to the matrix stuff that we're doing here. I'm sort of brand new to all this, and am I right in saying that you need to always loop when you're working with images, even if it's a single image?
If you need to link, I'm not sure.
No, sorry, loop. If you're outputting a single image, would you always need to use the loop?
Oh yeah,
tag
yeah. I'm sorry.
to output it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but not exactly. So yes, images are stored as an array in the system. There's always a chance that your image field can have multiple images. So Craft always stores your image as an array. So even if you have a single image, it's treated as an array in the system. So that means that in your code, you have to, if you have an assets field, so you're going to need to say for image in asset field, and then access that image dot whatever. I got the wrong syntax here. So this would be one way that you can access your asset field. Now, there's another tag that Craft gives you, which is this first tag. So you can also access your asset field directly. So I should maybe update this example up here. So we're here now. We're looping through our image in block image, and we're outputting our file name. And now with this first function, we can basically just return ourselves the first image in that list of images, and then we can access it directly with our tag as well. So either of these syntaxes work, but they both have to be aware that all images are an array of images.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thanks.
Okay, and so just to continue on this discussion, so I have kind of the full redactor field here. If we were really going as far as we could here to optimize this for our clients, within our matrix field here, when we create our text field, that's a rich text field, we can change the config of that text field to be a different config. And we can customize these configs as well. So if I refresh now, we'll see that in our text area field, now we only have bold and italic, which might be a little extreme for a blog post or something like that. But point being, we can customize this. And if we're going to the extreme of, we want the client to only be able to use an image here, not up here, we're able to hide that image. So they don't even have the option. They don't even know it exists. They don't have to decide between the two. This is the only way to do it. Now, I guess one other trade-off, which I think is worth considering in all of this, is building out posts as matrix layouts does make it harder to just copy and paste a blog post from one system to another. You can't import all your posts from WordPress into Craft, like into matrix fields. You got to import them into one field and then go through and break them out into multiple matrix blocks. And if you ever decided to go the other way, you had a lot of posts with matrix blocks in Craft, and you wanted to take them somewhere else, you wouldn't be copying and pasting them one at a time from the system. You'd either need to be doing it in multiple parts, or you'd need to be outputting it separately or doing it programmatically. So there is, I don't, it's possible to migrate between systems. I don't think that's the concern, but it's not as simple as you're just copying and pasting one field once you start breaking stuff into matrix blocks like this. And I guess before we go on, I should make a nod to up here is where you're going to switch between entry types. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Just on that, Ben, that was something that I had a question with, just the distinction between entry types and separate sections. I know it might not be exactly what we're talking about, but is there a general rule in creating a blog with, say, 3 entry types as opposed to having your case studies and blogs separate? Because you've already got the flexibility with having your fields sort of shared.
Yeah, you can. You raise a good point. You could really just do all of this in the matrix if you wanted to. And so to some degree, I think, yes, there is, but it's hard to explain up front. I think I'll give you a couple examples, which I think the best kind of entry type case is the Tumblr type mind state, where you're just posting a different thing to your blog each time, and the fields associated with that blog are different. I think when you're getting into matrix, you're getting into longer form content that might change in the middle. So halfway through your article, you need a big banner image, and then down farther, you want a big pull quote or something. It's that type of content that is a little more suited for matrix and the arbitrariness of it, in the sense of you might want to start with the pull quote on one post, and you might want to finish with it on another. So I think in my view, like, entry types are best when you've kind of got similar, when you've got a similar type of content that needs different layouts. So you've got a blog that needs multiple different types of posts or layouts, where matrix is best when you have like a entry that requires different layouts. So a single type of content requires different layouts. So
just to clarify though, Ben, I think Dane may have been asking when to use entry types versus when to use individual sections.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
correct?
look,
Okay,
I think what you were saying, it clarifies that side of it. But yeah, I was probably more so, say you've got a blog and a case study section, and maybe case study is not the best term to use because we're using that in the example, but I was just wondering whether the approach is to have one section and you have a blog post and what would be like a different type of content, like case study, in the one section, and distinguish between them through entry types, or you just have a blog post section and a separate case study section.
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the things that I haven't really. At the moment, I'm just treating the sections as, I've got one for blog, one for case studies, and it's working fine. But I just wondered whether there was something I was sort of missing with the entry types. But I think the example that you said before was, that Tumblr approach, same content but different type of fields. That's where the distinguishing of the entry type is.
Yeah, go on.
One use case I can see for wanting to use entry types is if you have a structure, for example, which lists out the structure of your website or your navigation, then you can put different types of content into the same structure, if you know what I mean, using entry types. So for example, let's say you wanted your navigation.
I'll get an example.
That'd be great. So, as soon as Ben's ready, All right. So we're looking at a structure called services, and
it might be better if I let me just add a dummy. Let me know if I'm going in the right direction here for you. I think this is.
Yeah, you are exactly, and this is probably going to help illustrate it. But and Dane, you can probably see where I'm going with this. But you have a simple structure here, so you can create this kind of navigation structure, but within this you can create different types of content, and that's only possible with entry types.
So the challenge here is there's no way to restrict which levels get which entry type. So you might have a scenario where you want like an overview page at the top here that says like, we do web things, we do app things, here's details on that. And then underneath that you have multiple pages that kind of describe the specific things you do that are separate. Yep. And they might have a different layout. They might be more case study style layout, where this is more of a marketing overview type layout. So you could kind of have a self-enforced system where at the top level it would be the marketing entry type, and at the second level it would be the case study entry type.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So quick comment on that.
Yep.
I use it just like you're using there for a team member page where they wanted a top level category of team members and then team members under that. But they wanted to be able to see that structure, so I use the same thing. One of my entry types is called category, which is the top level. It's too deep. And then the other one's team member. But what I'm finding is it would be really cool if when you create a new entry, if it would pop up and ask you what kind of entry. Because what I'm finding is the client will click that and it'll default to a team member, and they go, well, how do I create the category? And then you can show them on the right side there, but I don't know if any of you guys have any feedback on that, but I think that would be kind of neat if you have multiple entry types to ask you when you create a new entry what you're looking to create.
Yeah, no, I think I've seen several posts out in the forums that are kind of trying to find the right workflow around multiple tiered structure sections with entry types. So I think that'll be an ongoing discussion in the community, and we'll discover some better ways or good ways to communicate with people.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, guys. That clears that up.
Yeah, and the challenging thing here, I think, is that there's really a million different ways that you can combine all of these things, and there's no absolutely right way, and so you kind of have to convince yourself that at least there's one right way to start, just to get yourself going, and then you'll probably quickly develop an opinion of whether that way is right or wrong for your situation.
And this is just one use case here that we're looking at, and it could be that blog articles and case studies are radically different, but as Ben showed, his blog sometimes it has articles, but sometimes just links, so it's kind of related content that you probably want in the same channel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You could have like, I don't know, managers and team members, and you would have those in a staff channel, but you wouldn't want to separate them out too much.
you actually think you can start combining these two. To give an example on straight up craft, um, at the so at one level, I have a just a link, I guess a link. I have a link entry type and I have a tweet entry type, which actually adjusts the whole, they adjust the fields of the entry to only have those fields with them. However, I also have a link, I also have a tweet matrix block so that I could be writing a longer form article and somewhere in the middle of it have a tweet call out or something if I want. And I kind of went back and forth. At first, I wasn't sure which way to go, and then I just decided, actually, I want this in both places because sometimes I really just want the whole entry to be, hey, this is what we have on the site, and another time I might want to be making here's supporting evidence if somebody said something in this article. So I think there's kind of room for these things to exist at all levels for the right use cases. Just have to decide what fits your scenario. All right. Well, we're 10 minutes to the hour, so I'm gonna, I guess the next thing I wanted to touch base on is the kind of taking this to the next level if we're gonna start digging in a little bit deeper. And I'm looking at just what's happening in the database when we deal with matrix blocks. And so I don't want to go too much into database stuff, but I just kind of want to speak out loud, kind of acknowledge what's going on. So by default, Craft is going to come with two database tables for your matrix blocks, the matrix blocks table and the matrix blocks types table. You'll see there's not, it's a lot of references going on in database to which fields are associated with this matrix block, what order those blocks should be in, and the types tie back into the field layout as well and the fields associated with things. So at the craft level, it's really initially it's just kind of helping define what's in our matrix blocks, how do they relate to our layouts and our fields in the system. And then every matrix field that you create, Craft is going to create another database table for you. And so in our case, when we created our case studies field, Craft created a new table called matrix content case study. And this is going to be very similar to your Craft content table, except it's special for your matrix data. If you look at the table, you'll see that it's got similar references as the Craft content table to the element ID and the locale, and then it's got a field, a column for each of the fields that we created in our table to be storing the data, and then just general metadata for the field of when it was, or the content for when it was created. So this is you don't need to worry about this if you're just kind of building out a site, but it's good to know that Craft is creating a new table for each of these because as you get into more, Craft kind of has this, I don't know, I think it's a good trade-off, and it's a trade-off we want, but it's something you need to be aware of. It makes the UI so simple in creating relationships between things and creating advanced matrix fields of content that if you get too advanced and you relate too many things or you get too many matrix fields going on, when you start querying for your data, things are going to slow down a bit. And so you got to be aware that things are very abstract at the database level because you could kind of create an interface that puts you in a bad position for the way you want to output your front end content if you nest things too much or get into too many relationships. And that's a general warning. I don't think it's going to be a big deal for most common use cases, but I don't doubt. I think one of the first posts I saw after Matrix was released was somebody asking like Brandon if there was a bug because he couldn't add over 100 matrix blocks or something like that. Immediately you see somebody like pushing the system in a way that probably hadn't been planned for on day one. Okay, any other comments here? That was I don't need to go into more detail on that. I just kind of wanted to point out what was happening under the hood there.
No, that's been great for me.
Okay, cool. Well, there's one more. I have one more thing on my list, and I think we have a few minutes, so I can give a quick dive into it. But I wanted to start talking about how, as our templates get more complex, what we can start doing to simplify them. And this is you'll see several people using this technique already, but the question is, here's our so here's our blog, and here's our index template. And let's say we've started, and let's just focus on matrix blocks right now. We could do this at the entry type level as well if we wanted to, but I think at a certain point, you don't need too much abstraction. But so one of the things we can do, and of course I didn't plan this part of the demo. So we can start breaking out all of these into separate templates. So let's say we wanted to manage each of our blocks separately for whatever reason. We could create a new folder here called, let's make it a hidden folder because we don't want to ask us directly. We'll call it blocks, and then we'll create a text.html and a file for quote image.html and a new file for quote. All right, so we've got a block kind of HTML file for each of these, and now we can let's just transfer our code into each of these. Our text is a really kind of stupid, simple one. Our image will be a little more, and then our. And so now we've kind of moved all of our HTML to separate files, so it's just contained and we can focus on it, maybe for whatever reason we want to, or maybe we have much more advanced fields that require a lot more code to get right. And then let's ditch our switch statement here. I'll just comment it out because but so now instead, we're still looping through our matrix block here, but we're going to do so, and we're going to actually, instead of identifying which version of the block type we're on, we're just going to include a file by the same name as the version of that block type. So in our case, our folder is blocks, and then our file type name is the same as our block.type. That's right. So I'll delete that. But you see, we've simplified all that to just basically be calling in an HTML file for each of our block types. And we need to make sure we have an HTML file there for each of our block types. But now if we refresh our page, index page here, we should see the same. You'll see nothing. Perfectly in my example, nothing changes. And it's working. So here we're just, it's one way to kind of optimize our code. And we could do this as well at the entry type level if we wanted to, get rid of our entry type altogether here and have some sort of include for entry types or something like that, and have our entry type. We could do something similar there where we break each of these, we have our whole matrix field in one of those files instead of each block or something like that.
That's cool.
So just a handy way to start optimizing your code if you start reaching that, gosh, this is a long file stage.
Is there any kind of hit on performance with doing lots of includes, similar to how EE used to be?
Yeah, actually, no. The EE and Craft, the way they render templates is completely different, and I'm sure Brad could speak to it a little more clearly than me. But in my understanding, the Craft is using Twig, which is a templating system, and Twig compiles down to PHP. So all includes in your Twig templates are actually kind of being compiled at the PHP level, and not affecting your performance. So you can use them as many as you want, nested as deep as you want in themselves, um, and just go crazy. In EE, what happens is there's an actual kind of parsing engine that goes over your page, and when it finds specific tags, it actually goes over your page again. And so when you start nesting things in EE, you run into this situation where the parser actually starts looping more times and just going deeper and deeper, and it can cause problems. But and one of the things you try to avoid in EE is you never want to have an embed statement in a loop or something like that. It usually really hits performance hard, and or I shouldn't speak too strongly to that, but it's a general best practice I've seen posted, and we've seen performance challenges from having too many embeds. Here where you're doing these includes, it shouldn't be affecting performance that much. And Brad, do you have any other comments on that you'd like to state? I don't feel deeply technical enough to comment too authoritatively.
No, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, it's Twig is just compiled down to PHP code, and that's all you're executing after the first time it compiles it. So it's super speedy.
Cool, thank you.
Cool. Well, we'll wrap it up there then. Thanks for everybody for swinging by, and yeah, we'll post this on Straight Up Craft when we get a chance to process it, and so you can refer to it there later.
Cool. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.